Hi everybody, Bobby Ogilvy, Project Manager and Professional Coach. So today's question, what is a daily Scrum or a daily Stand-Up? Okay, well this comes out of Agile, and it means that you have this daily, or I should say as frequent as however you choose to do it, meeting. It's supposed to be 15 minutes or less, and you're basically just getting a check-in on the team about what they've been working on, what they're working on now. So the three questions then, each person then needs to answer is, what did you work on yesterday? Or you could think of it as, what did you work on since last time we checked in? Update me on what you've done. What are you working on now? What's your current focus? And what obstacles, what impediments are in your way? And implicitly, from a managerial perspective, it's like, what obstacles do you need help with? Can you not resolve yourself, right? And then everyone goes around the circle and does this. And as much as this initially came out of IT development, this actually works in a ton of places. I've used this for sales, particularly once you have a big sales pipeline, a good sales process. It's quite useful for that. Really, it can be anything. And if you think of part of management, particularly on a bottom-up, very small scale level for startups, it just has this, it has this kind of tone of like, what do hey, what did you finish? Okay, so what are you working on now? Okay, good. All right, keep doing that thing. Okay, do you need any help with that? It's a very kind of intuitive and obvious way of managing and really setting a tone for how you operate, right? This also really comes out of this railing against what was a trend up to the early 90s of very, one, poorly done projects, but two, very kind of legalistic and tones where people would, let's say if you think of some big 2-year project, right? You initially get the specs, the requirements from the client, you go off and do it, 2 years later, here's your widget, right? And not just externally is that bad for the final client, the final product, but internally that's a bad way of operating. Here's your thing, see you in 2 years, see you when the project's done. No. In fact, actually, and this is actually very akin with military culture as well, you want as brief and as frequent communication as possible, because essentially that communication is going to be one, more timely and lively, right? It's fresher. But the brief part is to say, it's like, listen, it doesn't need to be some big long-winded report or something else. I just need you to as simply and clearly as possibly tell us all what you're doing, right? So you're trying to establish a rhythm of that. And I would say, as a guy who studies organizational psychology and leadership, it's also a good opportunity to build trust. You're building communication lines. And so how usefully and authentically you can do that is good. So I should say, to this end, you want to try to take expectations off of it, which is to say, I know sometimes as the manager you want to set big, aggressive goals, aggressive timelines, or there's, clear goals of yours, right? But yet, from a bottom-up standpoint, you want the frequency of communication and the truthfulness, the authenticity of that communication to really be there. And you can see how that authenticity can kind of be counter to having an agenda. And so people won't feel as open to say what's actually going on if every time they want to say the truth, they're punished, or you want to stifle them, or why don't we have it yet, right? As a manager, it's much better to get an accurate view of what's happening and respond to it effectively and create good expectations, as opposed to feeling like, oh, well, we said we would have that done in 2 weeks, therefore we're going to have that in 2 weeks. Well, no, this module was much more complex for these reasons, and we're still waiting on this thing, so that's not feasible, right? And so I would say the right answer then is you're putting more resources in whatever this complexity thing is, and creating a more realistic timeline. If there's something else you can do in terms of external communication, that can accelerate that could be useful as well. Maybe you can't. As opposed to someone thinking you're just going to kind of bullhead your way through this. It's micromanaging, and I don't mean to say it's not sensitive. It's like, it doesn't change things. Your ego, your want of like, but I want this to happen. I know you want it to happen. It's not feasible. That's I would say broadly two forces that the team manager, the operations manager is always dealing with. How do I stay productive and get people thinking about the goals we're trying to achieve, the reasons we're trying to achieve them, the milestones, and what's actually going on, what's feasible, what a real velocity or capacity is. And you theoretically want these to be as close as possible. We'll get into more aspects of Agile and Scrum, but as you get a sense of how much you can bite off in a sprint. So sprints we'll do another video on sprints. You get a better sense of how to estimate your velocity, right? And whether we're talking about 1 week at a time or 4 weeks at a time, whatever it is, the team gets better at saying like, how much can I bite off here? So that means over time, the team needs to internalize what their velocity is. And so when they're making estimates on things on the front of that sprint, their estimates should be getting better and better. And if they're fundamentally not, that probably means there's some top-down force, there's some top-down expectation, which is complicating things. There's some bias, there's something basically too demanding, too unfeasible about the situation that hasn't really been acknowledged yet. Anyway, stand-ups or scrums are a great management tool. I really recommend them for anyone. You don't have to bite off the whole Scrum thing, but even just that small, brief 15-minute or less meeting with your team is awesome. And I will say that as a team or operations manager, that's what you want to get into. Quick, tight communication with your team and a timely, a very fresh sense, knowing what's going on. And that's really going to drive not just the team performance, but for you to actually be good at managing operations, those are all very needed. So I encourage you to try stand-ups, scrums, and see how they work for you and adjust them as you need to. So again, I'm Bobby Ogilvy, Project Manager and Professional Coach. I hope you learned something, and I'll talk to you again soon.